If you want a small batch of cookies, you are in the right place. I've got 4 recipes for small batch cookies. You're not gonna wanna miss them. First up, we're gonna make small batch chocolate chip cookies. These are soft and chewy and perfect.
This recipe makes 6 perfect chocolate chip cookies. They are absolutely fantastic. You're gonna start with 4 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter, add in 1/4 cup of brown sugar and 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Stir that together. I've done all the math for you, so it makes it so easy. 1 large egg yolk, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda go in there and stir that together. Once that's mixed, you're gonna add 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. And then I love using mini chocolate chips in small batch recipes because a little bit seems like it goes a long way. I'm using 1/3 cup of mini chocolate chips here. You're gonna scoop this in desired size. These are 2 tablespoon cookie scoop. You're going to chill this and then you're gonna bake them and you have an easy recipe for chocolate chip cookies.
Now we're gonna make small batch chocolate chip cookies. It's a chocolate version of the one we just saw.
I love how chocolatey these are. They're perfect. Similarly, we're gonna start with 4 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter and add in 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar and 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. And then that egg yolk in there along with the 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla and salt and 1/4 teaspoon of salt and baking soda. Once that's stirred together, this is where we're gonna add the chocolate. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder to this along with my flour, which is 1/2 cup plus 1 tablespoon of flour. And then again, some mini chocolate chips, I'm using 1/3 cup. Once these are scooped, you're going to chill the dough and then bake them and you have the perfect small batch chocolate cookie.
Next, what about peanut butter cookies? I love peanut butter cookies and this small batch makes the perfect amount.
We're starting again with 1/4 cup of unsalted butter, but it's softened this time, and I'm adding in 1/4 cup of creamy peanut butter. You can use a hand mixer or do this by hand. 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar with 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, another large egg yolk along with 1.5 teaspoons of milk and 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I also add a pinch of salt to this. That's all you need. Once that's stirred together, we're going to add in 3/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of flour and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. So just stir that together. Once that is mixed, we don't need to chill this dough. You're going to scoop this into 2 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon, however you want. And then you're going to press those with the tines of a fork, crisscross pattern, bake them, and you have the perfect small batch of peanut butter cookies. Makes about 10.
And last but not least, small batch sugar cookies. These are drop sugar cookies with a simple icing. They're perfect.
3 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's been softened get mixed with 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 large egg yolk, add in 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/8 teaspoon of salt. You're gonna do 1/2 cup of flour for this. Scoop these and bake them. Makes about 5 cookies. We're gonna make a simple glaze with 3/4 cup of powdered sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream or milk.
Because sometimes I just want a few cookies, not a whole bunch, and I don't trust myself when they're in the freezer. So if I make about 6 cookies, it's perfect. Leave me a comment and let me know which one you're gonna make first, and keep watching for even more cookie recipes.